Hello Army, welcome back to my channel, and today we are talking about something that landed on social media this week and immediately went viral across every K-pop platform, every music community, and every corner of the internet where people take vocal performance seriously. Because two of the most credentialed voices in the global music industry sat down to analyze Jimin's vocal performance in Arirang, and what they said has left everyone, from casual listeners to professional musicians, completely unable to move on. Today we are breaking down every single thing that Richard Fink 4 and Johnny Cummings said about Jimin, who these men actually are and why their opinion carries the specific weight that it does, what the technical analysis of Jimin's voice actually means in plain language, and why the phrase "they arrived at BTS" feels like it has 8 members. There are 2 Jimins is not just a clever line but a genuinely accurate description of something that very few singers in the world can do. Let's get into it. Before we talk about what they said about Jimin, let me tell you exactly who Richard Fink 4 and Johnny Cummings are, because understanding their credentials is the entire foundation of why this reaction matters so much. Richard Fink 4 is described by the Wall Street Journal as the world's leading online vocal coach. He is a 4-time Guinness World Record breaker, 4 times, in the field of vocal performance. One of those records is for holding the longest continuous vocal note ever recorded, a feat that required not just extraordinary natural ability but years of scientific understanding of how the human voice works at a physiological level. He is the creator of the Throga technique, a patented vocal training system, the first of its kind in United States history to be awarded a full utility patent, and a #1 best-selling author in vocal education. He has coached singers across 126 countries on all 7 continents. His clients include finalists on The Voice, America's Got Talent, X Factor, and American Idol. He has coached members of Big Time Rush, Daughtry, The Temptations, and Broadway stars. He co-wrote and demoed songs for Josh Groban and Michael Jackson. This is a person who has spent his entire adult life inside the physiology of the human voice, who understands not just what a great voice sounds like but why it sounds that way, what is happening inside the body when a singer produces a certain sound, and how rare or common particular vocal techniques actually are across the full spectrum of professional singers worldwide. Johnny Cummings is a Billboard #1 songwriter, award-winning singer, songwriter, and producer from Rochester, New York. He has co-written and produced hundreds of songs spanning pop, rock, country, R&B, and progressive genres, working with multi-platinum artists signed with Sony, Warner Brothers, EMI, and RCA Records. He has performed on stage thousands of times in venues across New York City, Los Angeles, Nashville, and beyond, and has opened for major artists including Kenny Chesney. Together, Richard and Johnny host a YouTube reaction and analysis channel that has attracted over 300,000 subscribers and generates over 3 million views per month, a channel where they bring their combined expertise in vocal physiology and songwriting craft to the analysis of performances from artists around the world. When these 2 men sit down to react to a singer, they are not reacting as fans. They are reacting as professionals who have spent their careers understanding exactly what makes the human voice do what it does. And when they reacted to Jimin singing in Arirang, what they found stopped them both in their tracks. The moment that triggered the deepest analysis in their reaction was a specific 3-second section of Jimin's performance where he transitions into head voice. And the first thing they noted, the thing that immediately signaled to both of them that something unusual was happening, was a dramatic shift in tone. They said, in the last 3 seconds, the tone of his voice is really different from the previous song when he uses head voice. Now let me put that in context for anyone who is not deeply familiar with vocal technique. In singing, the chest voice is the lower register, the fuller, warmer, more resonant sound that most people associate with normal speaking and lower singing. The head voice is the higher register, lighter, more airy, with the resonance shifting into the upper parts of the face and skull. Most singers have a perceptible shift, sometimes called a passaggio or break, when moving between these registers. The ability to move between them smoothly, to make the transition imperceptible to a listener, is one of the fundamental challenges of vocal training. But what Jimin does is not just move between registers smoothly. He moves between them and arrives somewhere tonally different, somewhere that sounds not like a cleaner or higher version of the same voice but like a genuinely different voice altogether. And that is what Richard and Johnny were reacting to. After establishing that the tone shift was dramatic and distinct, Johnny said, "It sounds like a different singer." And that observation, simple, direct, delivered by a man who has listened to thousands of professional singers over a career spanning decades, is the one that became the viral centerpiece of the reaction. It sounds like a different singer. Not that it sounds better or worse. Not that it sounds higher or lower. That it sounds like a different person is making the sound. A different person with a different voice, a different character, a different presence. The voice that Jimin uses in his chest register and the voice that Jimin uses in his head register are not simply two registers of the same voice. They are two distinct vocal personalities sharing one body. And both Richard and Johnny, with their combined expertise in vocal physiology and songwriting, heard that and named it immediately. Richard then went deeper into the technical explanation. He identified the specific mechanism that produces this effect as distortion within the vocal folds, a technique that, when executed correctly, adds texture, warmth, and character to a voice that would otherwise be clear and pure. He said there was some distortion in the voice, and that it was cool. But let me expand on what that actually means, because distortion in the context of vocal performance is not what most people imagine when they hear that word. It is not damage. It is not imperfection. Distortion in a singing voice, when controlled and intentional, is the same phenomenon that gives legendary rock and soul singers their distinctive grit, the specific quality that makes certain voices feel more alive, more urgent, more emotionally present than voices that are technically perfect but tonally flat. It is one of the hardest techniques to control because too much of it causes strain and potential vocal injury, while too little makes it disappear entirely. The sweet spot of controlled distortion, where the texture enriches the sound without destabilizing it, is where the most expressive singers in the world operate. And Jimin, in Ararang, was operating in that sweet spot. Richard then explained the mechanics more specifically. With the pushing technique in the vocal folds, he creates a really different mood. The pushing technique in the vocal folds is a reference to the specific way a singer can use the intrinsic muscles of the larynx to create additional pressure and tension in the vocal folds, producing a sound that is richer, denser, and more emotionally loaded than relaxed singing. This technique, combined with the transition into head voice that Jimin executes in those final 3 seconds, creates the sensation that Richard and Johnny described of hearing not just a different register but a different singer. Because the mood created by the chest voice with intentional distortion and the mood created by the clear, pure head voice are so different from each other that the human ear processes them as belonging to two separate vocal personalities. And this is where their conversation arrived at the phrase that has traveled furthest across the internet this week. Richard said, "So, 2 Jimins?" And Johnny replied, "Yup, 2 Jimins." And then one of them added the line that is, in my view, the most precisely accurate description of what Jimin represents as a vocalist right now: the world probably isn't ready for 2 Jimins. The world isn't ready. That phrase, said by a 4-time Guinness World Record holder in vocal performance, in the context of a technical analysis that he just conducted of Jimin's vocal fold pressure technique and his head voice transition. Not by a fan writing in all caps at 2 a.m. By the man the Wall Street Journal calls the world's leading online vocal coach. The world isn't ready. Now let's put this in the context of everything else that has been said about Jimin's voice in the Ararang era, because what Richard and Johnny observed is not happening in isolation. It is the latest in a series of moments, this comeback cycle in which professionals who engage with music at the highest technical and creative level have responded to Jimin's performance with language that goes beyond standard praise. Earlier in the Ararang era, former BTS producer Jun stated in a YouTube interview that Jimin has the best singing voice in BTS, not the most popular voice, not the most recognizable voice, but the best singing voice. He said this as the person who was present in the recording sessions, who heard all 7 members sing in controlled studio conditions without the enhancement of mixing or production. His assessment was based on direct, first-hand experience of what Jimin's voice sounds like when it is doing the thing it was built to do. And now Richard think for someone who has no professional connection to BTS, no financial incentive to praise Jimin, no history of K-pop content that might suggest he is catering to an existing audience, sits down to analyze Jimin's vocal performance in Ararang and arrives at the same essential conclusion through a completely different route. The conclusion is not just that Jimin is good. The conclusion is that Jimin is doing something technically specific and technically rare that places him in a category that even professionals who have heard thousands of singers struggle to describe without reaching for the language of multiplication. 2 singers. 2 Jimins. One voice that contains 2 distinct vocal personalities so fully developed and so clearly differentiated that a Guinness World Record holder hears them as belonging to 2 separate people. Let me also talk about what this specific analysis means for Jimin as an artist in the Arirang era, because the timing of this reaction is not incidental. Jimin entered the Arirang comeback as a person who had just completed military service, who had spent the hiatus years releasing his solo album Face, which debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and produced like crazy, the first song by a Korean solo artist to debut at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and who emerged from that entire arc visibly more settled in his own artistic identity than he had ever been before. The Jimin who was performing in Arirang is not the same Jimin who debuted with BTS in 2013. He is a person who has been praised consecutively by Gallup Korea as the most popular idol in South Korea, who is a global ambassador for Dior and Tiffany & Company, who dances with the elegance that makes critics reach for the word fairy, and whose vocal instrument has been refined by 13 years of professional performance into something that can now make a 4-time Guinness World Record holder say the world isn't ready. The technical dimension of what Richard and Johnny identified also connects to something that Jimin himself has talked about in interviews: his perfectionism, his relentless work ethic, his sense that even the smallest mistake on stage is something to feel guilty about. In the BTS documentary Burn the Stage, he addressed this directly. And what that perfectionism produces, in a person who also has the natural gifts that his father recognized when he was singing the high notes of Azalea at a karaoke at age 10, is exactly what Richard and Johnny heard in Arirang, a voice that has been trained to such a degree of precision and control that it can execute the specific pushing technique in the vocal folds, navigate the transition into head voice, and deliver intentional distortion, all within the emotional framework of a performance that the listener experiences not as technical exercise but as pure feeling. The technique serves the feeling. The feeling requires the technique. And the result is 2 Jimins. It is also worth noting who Richard Fink 4 is as a person beyond his professional credentials, because there is a dimension of his story that makes his reaction to Jimin's voice carry a very specific additional weight. As a child, Richard was told by doctors that he would likely be profoundly deaf by the age of 30. He had 80% hearing loss in his right ear with complete comprehension loss, and 40% hearing loss in his left ear with significant comprehension difficulties. He learned sign language as a teenager while holding on to music as the central passion of his life. And against every medical prediction, he did not go deaf. He went on to become the world's leading online vocal coach, to break the Guinness World Record for the longest continuous vocal note, and to spend his career teaching people in 126 countries across all 7 continents how to use their voices. When a man who fought to hear music at all, who built his entire life around the miracle of being able to engage with sound, tells you that a particular voice contains 2 distinct singers, that the world is not ready for what that voice can do, the statement carries a weight that no amount of fan enthusiasm can manufacture. It comes from somewhere real. And here is the thing that brings all of this together in the context of April 2026, 5 days before the Arirang World Tour begins. The voice that Richard Fink 4 and Johnny Cummings just analyzed is about to be heard live in Goyang Stadium in Korea, and then in Tokyo, and then in Tampa, and then across 34 cities in 23 countries over the next 12 months. The 2 Jimins that they identified in his studio recording, the chest voice Jimin with intentional distortion who creates a dense and emotionally loaded presence, and the head voice Jimin who arrives like a completely different person and takes the song somewhere entirely unexpected, those 2 Jimins are going to stand on stadium stages in front of tens of thousands of people who have been waiting years for this. And what the audiences in those stadiums are going to hear, night after night across 82 shows, is exactly what a 4-time Guinness World Record holder just told the world they are not ready for. Maybe that is the point. Maybe BTS has always been the group that gives the world something it did not know it was waiting for, something it does not fully understand until it is already inside them. And maybe Jimin, with his 2 voices and his 1 extraordinary instrument, has always been the member who takes that principle furthest. The world isn't ready. Richard said it. Johnny agreed. And in 6 days, when the lights go up in Goyang and ParkJimin opens his mouth, the world is going to discover exactly what they meant. Hello Army, thank you so much for watching this all the way through. If this video gave you a new level of appreciation for what Jimin does every time he sings, please hit that like button because it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who deserve to know about this. Subscribe if you are not already here. The world tour starts in 5 days and we are going to be covering everything. Hit the bell so you never miss a single thing. And drop a comment below when you heard the phrase 2 Jimins. What was your first reaction? Tell me everything. I will see you in the next one. Bye, Army.